The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
All right, I'd like to call the regular board meeting to order, and we'll start with roll call. Sandy, can you help us out?
Sure. McCoy?
Here.
Shelton?
Here.
Sitnikau?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Vanden, Heuvel?
Here?
Warren?
Here.
And then Becker?
Tell me.
Yep,
Oh, here it
looks
is.
like Becker's connecting to audio.
Hello.
Andrew, are you here?
Yeah, the video's not connecting, but at least I see all of you and I can hear.
Well, that's good. It's your turn for roll call, and you just said here, so that counts.
Great.
All right, all 7 board members are here. I would entertain a motion to convene in closed session.
I will read it again, or you want to take it?
Go ahead, Kristina.
No, you go. I've been doing it every week. I would love for you to take it.
I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. More specifically, to wit, potential property acquisition. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, administrative restructuring and assignments. The board will reconvene in open session at 6:00 p.m. pursuant to section 19.852 Wisconsin statute to consider the balance of the agenda, which will include an open forum, system and monitoring reports, and the superintendent's update. The board may reconvene in closed session after the conclusion of the regular board meeting for such reasons noted in this posting and pursuant to a proper motion. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
Smith?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden, Heuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Becker?
Hi.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Pass 7-0. We will jump off and head over to closed session.
See you at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Josh. All right, thanks, Josh. Can I have a motion to move back into open session? Anybody?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Sandy, do we need to do roll call for that?
Smith?
Aye.
Vanden, Heuvel?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Here.
Warren?
Aye.
All right, pass 7-0. We took roll call before we went into closed session at 5 o'clock. All 7 board members were present. I'd also like to, we're also joined by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld and members of her cabinet, along with 2 members of the Intercity Student Council, Luke Pisani from Southwest High School and Yuli Navarro. Yuli, do you go to Preble? Oh, East.
East.
East, yes.
Yep.
From East. So welcome to you as well. So before we get started any further, let's go to the Pledge of Allegiance, see if we can be more in sync than we were last time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, that was somehow worse. We will continue to try to get better. Maybe we'll have practice, Pledge of Allegiance practice. All right, mission statement. Dawn, would you be able to read the mission statement for us? Do you have it on the agenda there?
I do. We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Perfect, thank you. Next, we'll go to our board collaborative commitments. These were agreements that we came upon as a board in our work sessions, and before each of our regular board meetings, we like to read them. I'm going to call on people, so if you have them, if we could get them in front of you, they're attached to the agenda, and I'll just call on people as they are on my screen. So Dawn, if you could read number 1.
We will strive to review board materials and seek clarifying information before board meetings.
Brenda, you're up. You're on mute. Laura, you're on deck.
Okay, I'm good. We will embrace diverse views and perspectives as a path to effective solutions.
Laura?
We will show consideration to everyone, fellow board members, staff, students, families, and community members in our speech and behavior.
Perfect. Kristina and then Andrew.
We will consider the merits of ideas as the primary driver of our decisions.
And we will offer our comments efficiently and succinctly and avoid repetition in order to keep board meetings to a reasonable length.
Rhonda?
We will create equitable and inclusive opportunities to promote community engagement.
And finally, we will engage in conversations in a way that allows for all perspectives to be shared, considered, and valued. Thank you, guys. All right, next on the agenda is open forum. As a reminder, even though we're doing virtual meetings, we encourage our community to be involved. They certainly can email their comments to boardofelducation@gbaps.org. There are directions for calling into board meetings. Sandy, do we have the directions for calling in can also be found on our website. Sandy, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. We have one.
Okay.
And it's Noah Becker, and he would like his comments read. So we will have someone read the comments.
Okay. Who has the comment? Do I have them in front of me?
They're attached to Agenda Manager, yes.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Aren't we supposed to have some kind of a neutral party who no one, I mean, this.
Yes, we are.
We have a neutral party here, Andrew.
Oh, we have them. Okay, okay, great. Okay.
Yep, we're ready.
Great.
These comments are from Noah Becker, 1254 Reed Street, Green Bay, Wisconsin. The subject of his comments are on the grading policy. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the board. As a student representative, I have received many questions about the grading policy for IB, AP, and dual credit courses. I understand that dual credit is governed by the colleges with which the district contracts. However, IB and AP are up to the district to grade and it does not make sense to not accept the March 13th grades as already agreed to by the district. The memorandum passed by the board stated that AP and IB exams may be altered, but only made a grading exception for dual credit due to the third party involved. IB and AP should allow for the grades established on March 13th to be carried to the final transcript because that is what the board has agreed to. The merit of the March 13th idea might be debatable, but whether to exempt particular programs that the board hasn't authorized really isn't in my view. Thank you for looking closely at this, as many students would appreciate a formal update from the district regarding this, as well as justification for rejecting the March 13th grades for any non-dual credit courses.
Okay, thanks to Noah for submitting those comments. That's the first public comment that we've had since we went virtual, so that's nice.
Eric,
Yes.
would you like Mr. Magus to follow up with that and provide the board with a written response and as well?
Yeah, that would be great.
That background, and then obviously you'll follow up as well with Mr. Becker, young Mr. Becker as well,
Yeah.
and whoever, the principals and whatnot. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. All right. Need a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, passed 7-0. Next on the agenda is, we don't have any monitoring reports, so we will go to superintendent updates, and I will hand that over to Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'd like to begin with the calendar this evening, and we have coming up very soon on May 21st, our Intercity Student Council meeting in the boardroom, or virtually this year as well, and that'll be at 7:30. May 25th, we have Memorial Day, so all district buildings will be closed. On June 1st, it's our first board meeting of the month, teaching and learning work session beginning at 6 p.m. And that also is virtually planned, as well as the organizational support work session meeting immediately following. June 15th, we do have the regular board meeting at 6 o'clock scheduled as well, and that is also scheduled to be virtual. So that concludes the calendar for the month of June and the end of May. And then as we move forward, the next topic I have on the agenda is Redesign 2020 update. The goal of this discussion is to really just do a level set. As you recall, our last discussion was right before we began doing our work on the pandemic planning. We, right about that same time at the very end of February, was our first notice from the Department of Public Instruction and the Health Department that we were moving into a possible pandemic. There was some work done, so I thought it would be important to provide that to the board this evening. And then Vicki Beyer will be sharing her work and giving you a summary of where things are at. But the intention of this is to open that discussion to make sure that it gets on people's radar, that it is continuing. I think that a lot of the work has been focused most recently around COVID-19 and the work that we're doing, but we didn't want to lose sight of what else is moving in the district. So it was a request of the board president and vice president to have a conversation and do a level reset at this time, with the knowledge that this would come back many, many more times and give the community and others the opportunity to weigh in. So it's just reopening that door. On our website, there is a Redesign 2020 blog that most recently came in February after the retreat that we held with the Board of Education in an effort to continue that work that began in 2016 to really look at the inequities in enrollment in the facilities across the district. And at that point, really talking about looking at, we reviewed, if you recall, school capacities, enrollment, projections, and so forth, and looked at the results of the facility survey. All of those documents still are posted on our website for anyone to review if they'd like to go back and do so. Also, as part of the discussion, and I think a very important part of the discussion, was the why. What are the reasons that we would even need to have this kind of discussion? And we talked about this ever-changing educational landscape, and obviously we're in yet another educational change in terms of how we're delivering student learning in a continuum of learning right now with virtual learning. So that was not on our radar in February, but it certainly is now. We were also looking at and discussing declining enrollment. We were looking at open enrollment, vouchers, all of the things that were impacting our student enrollment, and also the mobility. And I think one of the opportunities now as you drive around our community and you see the wonderful senior signs, you can see how diverse and how mobile our students are, because you can have, in one place I saw an east and a west sign just right next to one another in the same area. So we know that students are highly mobile. The board's goal at that time in our retreat was to set both long and short-term goals, and really looking at how do we maximize our resources so that we can ensure not only the greatest efficiencies, but equally, if not more important, equitable opportunities, and really address the mission and vision for our students. So we had a facilitated discussion, and at the end of that discussion, there were a number of things on the radar that the board had asked us to continue to do more exploration. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of those things, and Vicki's going to share with you where it landed and the exploration that she did. And the areas that she did a lot of exploration with were the Northeast Wisconsin School of Innovation, NEW school, that is at the Cherry Street building in partnership at that same time now at that same location with John Dewey Academy of Learning. And I want to remind folks that they went into this space on Cherry Street. It is a lease space, and the focus was to be able to see how they could work collaboratively together, and I think they've done a great job with that. But equally as important as NEW looks to grow is that a place and space that they can continue in. And I also want to remind everyone that the John Dewey Academy of Learning, we are still at a place where we have a $2.25 million budget for a place and space for John Dewey that was part of the 2017 referendum that was approved. So moving forward, the repurposing and the discussions that Vicki will share with you are places and spaces that we looked at that had enrollments that would afford perhaps a co-location of schools or programming, and also places and spaces that could accommodate NEW in the future as well. So I know that Vicki did a lot of homework and really did some really good background research because for those who had been part of the 2017 referendum, there was a lot of conversation held with families about what their desires were for their place, for their students' learning. And in addition to that, a lot of information and survey data. So I think that's an important grounding piece as well that she's going to bring into this discussion. So the charge from the board's request that Vicki will be sharing specifically are around NEW and John Dewey, and looking at what options are available for them as we look to the 2021-22 school year. So again, this is a level reset. It's intended to put more information on the table and afford the board at future meetings the ability to give us greater direction and guidance as to where you'd like to go next. So, are you good to go, Vicki?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Thanks.
Michelle. District administration were asked at the February 26th and 27th board retreat to explore options for NEW and JVL.
As Michelle mentioned, NEW is currently located at the 701 Cherry Street. It's a leased building that's shared with John Dewey, and by the year 21-22, by that school year, they will have outgrown the space. Options included for us to explore were the repurpose of Keller Elementary for NEW, repurpose of Lincoln Elementary for NEW, relocate NEW to district office, repurpose of Keller for JADAL, move Keller into the second floor, JADAL into the second floor of Keller, and finally purchasing 701 Cherry Street for JADAL. In 2017, as part of the referendum option considerations, the school leadership at JADAL engaged the entire learning community. So they spoke to staff, students, families in identifying what the desired and required learning setting might be. And we used that model in part for NEW as well. Student groups created plans. I think Andrew probably and Brenda remember the 3 plans that the students had come up with back then. Staff referred to those presentations when discussing the merits of the options that the board asked us to look into just this February. In addition, JADAL families, students, and staff participated in interviews with Dr. Stramp and Molly Rosnick as part of their 5-year charter school review process. A few strong themes came out for JADAL through the interviews: a building that would not have to be shared with another school, access to city transportation, and access to turbocharge opportunities. NEW leadership held many discussions with staff related to what the school and students need in order to continue to build school culture and an educational continuum. These meetings focused on the strong points and concerns around the options that the board asked us to look into. NEW Innovation Student Council has been involved as well, although specific locations weren't discussed with the students. The students did provide input and feedback as to what was important to them. Parents for NEW have not yet engaged in this process pending direction from the board. However, NEW has taken parent comments, concerns, questions as part of their research. Location, access, and resources have been the constant theme for that group. School leadership then from JADAL and NEW toured the locations with Mike Stengel, Pete Ross, and Renee Embry, who's their supervisor. They've also been in regular consultation with their governance council. What I asked them to do, both schools, was to develop a list of required and desired buildings or facilities. And I'll share with the board the entire list, but some of the things they were looking at, for example, with NEW, required permanent home to establish roots in culture, not a shared space, easy access to transportation, especially metro. If you'll recall, NEW as well as JADAL have students coming from the entire district. Proximity to community services, Boys and Girls Club, for example, family services, flexible space, common space, enough green space to increase movement, space to help preserve student dignity when they are in crisis. This was something that was really important to NEW. And then parking, ample parking. For JADAL, they listed their own building, not to be shared with another school, sufficient space for project-based learning, again, a central location to accommodate all families, preferably near businesses and partnerships. If not centrally located, then transportation was important to them. Separate learning spaces within the building for middle and high school learners. Non-traditional floor plan for JADAL. And it was important for both the schools that they be close to a traditional, for NEW, close to a traditional middle and high school, and for JADAL, close to a traditional high school. For NEW, I'll summarize the findings as they went through the different locations. Repurposing Keller for NEW was the first one they looked at.
Vicki,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Just to remind people, when you talk about Keller, to recall that the reason there was space there is because the Head Start students were going to be relocated. So there is space at Keller. So that's why Keller was an option. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I have a quick question, Vicki. You're going to be sharing all of this in a document with us, right? So I don't have to take all these notes down.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right, keep going.
Yeah. The repurposing of Keller for NEW, they felt like it had enough space for programming, but would require substantial renovations. The repurpose of Lincoln, Michelle, did you want to address Lincoln being mentioned?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the reason that we had originally brought forward when you looked at the data around where the students, how many students are at Lincoln and how many students actually are in that attendance area. And I don't know if Mike, if you have that exact number, but it's a small number of students, a significant number of students' choice to other neighborhood schools in that area. So
yeah.
If you want to share that.
Yes, there are 246 students that live in the Lincoln attendance area. Of those, 115 go to Lincoln. That's about 48%, and 133 transfer to other schools, about 54%.
So more than half. So, and then the recognition that in terms of around surrounding neighborhood schools, there is opportunity and space if you were to repurpose Lincoln and invite those students to attend other schools in the nearby neighborhood. Yep, go ahead.
Also, Lincoln is within walking distance to Franklin and West High School, and it's also on a fairly major bus route.
Kristina?
Mike, I'm assuming we have the data of where the other students choice into. You could give us that information if we.
Yes, I have that. You know, just for instance, we have, you know, several that go to, like 11 that go to Aldo Leopold, 13 that go to Chapel, but they go to probably 20 different schools everywhere from King and Jefferson to Elmore and Webster. So yes, we can get you that information.
Thanks, Mike.
And can I ask Vicki just to touch on something that you brought up about the with repurposing Keller? You'd mentioned it would require substantial renovation. Can you touch on what that would look like, or what would that entail?
Yeah.
Or what did they feel it would entail?
Yeah.
Use the word substantial.
Yeah, right. Needed new open entry area for staff and visitors, so visitor location in front. Needed a separate commons area for food service cafeteria. New built-ins counter height for middle school and high school students. Bathroom height would have to be adjusted. Transportation for students, well, that's not a renovation, but transportation was a concern because it's not centrally located. Visible, flexible spaces, non-traditional learning spaces. Remodel of second floor for academy students. CTE space, science labs, life skills labs, refurbished locker rooms, showers, gender neutral bathrooms on each floor. A space for mental health, third party. They want to bring OHP in at some point, oral health partners. Space for a caring closet, laundry, food bank.
You know, one of their concerns is Keller has a lot of small classrooms, and with the way they're set up now, they have larger classrooms that they use for labs, and so they would look at, you know, taking classrooms and combining them, making larger spaces and having a more open atmosphere than closed in classrooms like Keller's.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The repurpose of Lincoln for NEW, there too, there would need some remodeling, but Jason, the school leader, felt like it wouldn't need as much. Enough space for programming. They felt the central location was ideal, similar to the reason why they like the location on Cherry Street, because they have access to downtown resources. And again, with their school, students are coming from all over the district. Current space allows for mental health and third-party resources in the building. Ample green space, and it's within walking distance of not only middle school and high school, but also the Boys and Girls Club, which a lot of their students utilize. The next option they looked into is relocating NEW to district office. They would need renovation at the entrance, making it more welcoming. Visible, flexible spaces and turning the offices into classrooms. They would need a gym space, cafeteria space, kitchen, science labs, BTE labs, life skill labs. They were concerned about the lack of green space. They do like the central location because they would be able to continue to rely on Metro, but had concern about it being such a large building with a lot of nooks and crannies. Jadal, repurposed color.
Vicki, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
When you listed the, and I didn't write them all down, but the list of things that included life skills classes, those various kinds of things. You listed those both for Keller and the district office, but not for Lincoln. So Lincoln has you mentioned Lincoln has space for mental health and third-party resources. Do they also have those spaces for the life skills classes and things?
No, they don't. They would have to be renovated as well, but Jason felt like it would be less of a remodel.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Facility. You're welcome.
Vicki, do you think part of that is because they house the OTPT staff? So there's spaces and places more, unlike Keller, that's a true elementary school. Lincoln has adults residing in there as well as part of the OTPT programs, and there's some different spaces. I've been in their offices and talked to them, and they have some big common spaces and things that are grown-up height as opposed to small children height. So
right.
that probably may have factored in. I don't know, but.
Thank you. The repurpose of Keller for Jadal, there too would require some remodeling to accommodate older learners and a non-traditional approach to learning. They were concerned about it's not centrally located, which is really important to the families. And it's not close to middle or high school for students who want to take courses not offered at Jadal, which they currently do. They also looked into just utilizing the second floor of Keller. The plan for the expansion grant for Jadal would have them at least 360 students by the 23-24 school year. So the second floor would not accommodate that. And then the last option to look at was for Jadal to remain at the Cherry Street facility. Very little, if any, remodeling would be needed. It's a central location. It's been working really well for the families. And it's close to traditional schools for students who wish to enroll in courses that Jadal doesn't offer. So the conclusion from the two groups, the two schools, was that Lincoln Elementary would require the least amount of modifications to meet the needs of NEW innovation. The central location allows the school to continue to rely on Metro, has ample space for mental health, third-party services, green space, and walking distance to middle school, high school, and Boys and Girls Club. 701 Cherry Street would be the ideal choice for JDOL, and this is the preferred space for students, staff, and families. Excuse me. The 3 floors of the building provide sufficient space for the 3 programs, and a centralized location works well for families, as well as to provide authentic learning experiences with area business partnerships and involvement in community organizations and events. That is the end of my report.
Go ahead, Kristina.
Thanks, Vicki. In your stakeholder overview for NEW, did that include feedback from Lincoln staff and parents and students on how they would feel if they were to be moved into other spaces? Or is that just from the NEW perspective?
My understanding is that would be the next step if the board wants us to pursue anything further.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the plan is, as we move forward, would be for Vicki then to post and share this document. I know you were putting the final touches on it earlier today, but then afford the board to the opportunity to spend some time really getting into the document and bring it back at the next meeting, and then start to entertain questions and get your direction. Does that make sense to people? That, you know, unless there's some things right now that jump out that you want us to continue the work on, that would be an opportunity. And we're willing to do wherever you want to go, but I know this is a lot to digest.
Yeah, Michelle, I think, you know, part of our intention when the board said, hey, where's this at? And let's kind of, you said, do a level set. And Vicki, I definitely jogged my memory on some things that we had talked about, and appreciate the work that's been done. So yeah, I think here tonight is to kind of get this refresh, and then just kind of keep the conversation moving and bring it back to the surface, because certainly it's fallen away for the last couple of months for good reason. So I think that, yeah, if we can bring it back at the next meeting, if there's another update or start to think about next steps, it's hard to, you know, I think about the session, the 2 days that we met in February, and we've got a lot of information up on the walls and in front of us, and we're moving around the room, and there's chart paper. And then to have Vicki share with us information over Zoom, you know, it's hard to think about all of that. It's, you know, kind of a high level thing. So, but I definitely appreciate the update and feel like can focus in on that work, and we'll just continue to move it forward and continue to have the discussion and ask all the questions.
Can I ask a clarifying question about just moving forward between now and our next meeting? So you're going to give us the document. Is that going to be public as well? Okay. Would you be able to, because obviously there's a lot of what was looked at, feedback in general. Is it clear that maybe with the conclusion is more of what's on the table? Is that a fair statement? And that's what's being truly considered? Because I think that's what I personally get on a regular basis, is what's actually really being considered.
Yeah.
I think,
go ahead, Michelle.
This is what's on the table is what the conclusions were for consideration from, and it's basically the ask of the board. Would you say that's accurate, Vicki? This is what the staff and the students and the families from these 2 schools said, we would like the board to consider this. Would you, is that accurate? Would you characterize it that way?
Based on what we were asked to look into from the retreat in February.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rhonda, how I would answer that question is what was on the table is what the board gave the administration direction to look into some more. So those, 5 different things, those are the ideas that came out of that meeting. All of those are on the table. We presented all of those ideas to the 2 schools that are impacted on one end, and that would be JDOL and NEW. Now, there are certainly other schools, but from those 2 schools' perspectives, they gave us sort of their preference out of everything that we set on the table. And now we'll have to, continue to ask. And maybe it's not too late for something new to come to the table, nor is a decision already made. Simply what Vicki shared is the feedback from 2 of the schools. So that's how I would answer your question.
And so I guess I'll be a little bit more clear. So then do we now, today, then do we ask as a board to go and get feedback from Lincoln families, staff, community members? Or is that the next step? Are we going to even be able to say that? Are we just going to hope it happens, or are we actively going to ask for that?
Well,
because that's the other end of the equation, right? That's the other end of the...
Personally, and maybe administration can jump in, but I think that a lot of the questions that those families would have, I don't think we have answers to yet. And certainly we need to start to, there's work that needs to be done. If I was a Lincoln parent, I would say, what's the plan? Where would my kid go? What does that mean? When does this take place? When does that happen? And I don't think we can answer those. I think that's the work that needs to be done between now and whenever.
Eric, can I push back on you just a little bit about that? And I don't know if this makes sense, but I think the way I look at it too, though, is with those stakeholder discussions is not to have the answers ready for them, but to see if they have some answers, right? What solutions do they have that we may not see? I mean, I'm thinking about Lincoln. And, if Mike's saying they go to 20 different schools, maybe we can get some insight onto why, and then that better sort of gives us an idea of how we move things. So I hear what you're saying, but I think when we think about engagement, I'd like to see them being more and informing us, not saying you're just saying that, but just important to keep that in mind.
No, yeah, that's a good point, because if we come with all the answers, then it fulfills that sort of belief that we've already made up our mind. So by doing it the other way and starting to engage them and yeah,
that's my point, is that if we don't actually go out and get in front of it, unlike what happened last time, and we don't actually look to them, we've already named the school, so it's out there. And if we're not, I believe, moving forward quickly on looking for feedback as much or as possible as that would be right now, I think that would be a misstep. So I'm hoping that we are going to do that soon.
I feel like a meeting in the middle of, sometimes it's useful to help spur ideas to have something to respond to. So I wonder if you come with sort of some vague sort of ideas to say, here's kind of what we might be thinking. What do you think? Do you have any other ideas? I think a middle ground with that, rather than coming with nothing and asking for their opinions. I think it might be helpful for them to hear at least something that we think might be feasible, and then have them respond to that.
One of the plan now would be for Vicki to also, she's had conversations, several, with the principals of the 2 schools. And this is certainly something that the school communities have been talking about for quite some time. I mean, this has been out there a fairly long time, since February, but these schools were discussed in the past as well, particularly Keller, but Lincoln as well. I mean, it's been an ongoing conversation for a fairly long time. So to be able to take it back out and have the principals speak to their school communities and continue to where you're headed, Brenda, I'm not sure that we have, we don't want to go out with solutions and answers because the board has not given us the answers. That's part of the challenge. but to be able to say, what questions do you have? What are your thoughts? We can gather those in terms of what they see. And I think that's critically important as well. And so that was the next step that we were thinking about, obviously, in sharing that information. Most important, I think, at the end of the day, unlike the last time, is that that's one of the critical reasons why we had this conversation now, is so that when the board, if the board chooses to do anything, and you may not, but if you choose to move forward, you would want to have a decision probably by fall to be able to start to move this process if you were shifting people and moving people, so that everything was in place, so that it's a smooth transition for any of our staff or families, so that everyone feels valued and supported in that transition. So
I do have a question, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So you have on here exploring Franklin as a possible K-8 school. At what point would you look at that? Because my kids are both Lincoln alumni, and that Franklin would be the next closest school. If that K-8 option was available, that would be it would be a nice transition and discussion point if that was actually an option and available to those families. I just don't know what the next steps are for that discussion around those pieces.
Well, we didn't get down to the bottom of the list here, but we could certainly explore those pieces together, because that was in fact one of the discussions that we didn't go very deep into, but it was on the table. And clearly it's in the notes from February as well.
Yeah, it would just be a really good, it would be a good, I don't want to say selling point, but it would be a good alternative for potentially displaced families if Lincoln would be a solution for NEW.
Dawn, you weren't at that retreat in February, were you, when we talked about this?
I was at the one that you had at night. I was not there during the day. So it was 2 days. I was there at night. I wasn't there during the day.
Yeah, because we talked about Franklin actually, I think in pretty good detail about that. The popularity of the K-8 model, especially maybe around the need for the West Side K-8. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, it just depending on your timing, if that would be a viable, and I don't know how viable it is, but if that would be a possibility, it would be, just given the proximity with Lincoln, if we were seriously looking at making that change, that would be a really good option to be able to give families.
So that would be responsive to just what Brenda was speaking about, is what do you think about this? If this happened, then what? We could certainly gather that information.
Excellent.
So that would be the next step, if you're just to get the families a little more engaged and community and getting their feedback, at least at a high level. Obviously, the board will have to make some deeper decisions, and we'll get you these documents. From a timeline perspective, and we're in the middle of some larger pieces, I'm not sure how quickly we can do that, but the goal would be to have some information, though, to you before school is out, if we can. So maybe we can invest and have Gwen help us with some of that and move that forward. So we can talk tomorrow with the timeline, and then if I could come back to you, Eric and Kristina, on Wednesday and let you know where staff is able to start to move some of this, if that would be helpful to you.
So can you?
Go ahead, Kristina.
Sorry, Rhonda, I just have two quick questions.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
When will this Vicky's document, how will that be available to the public? Will that go on the redesign website?
Sandy, we could put it on the redesign website. We could put it in the agenda manager for tonight as part of the documents for tonight, since she presented it at the meeting tonight as well. And then obviously send it to you.
Thank you. And then my second question is when are we going, or how does the discussion around Keller being under-enrolled, how does that play into the redesign? Because I know that was part of it initially, and I don't hear that being talked about in this discussion. So just curious about that.
At this point in time, we have not explored that because this was February and we went into a pandemic. I'll be really honest. We haven't
No,
gotten that yet.
that's okay. I need to ask the question so I know.
Yeah, no, I
where
think it's
we're going with
I'm
it.
not, I'm just saying that's the reality. So
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. So more to come on that.
more to come. Yes, ma'am.
Rhonda?
So to summarize, because I know I will be asked questions, the next steps are that the documents will be released, the public will have them, the board will have them, and then we're going to, or the district is going to look into getting some feedback from families at Lincoln and staff from Lincoln. Is that the next step? So is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is any other parties getting feedback from, or is it just focused on Lincoln?
We would have to do something also with Franklin if we were thinking about them being a K-8 and having at least some high-level preliminary discussion there as well, because we would start to have that moving there. I think the other piece, and it is a bigger piece, because I know the Keller is connected to Kennedy as well. There was some discussion if you were to repurpose Keller, if the NEW went to Keller, then, and so I would think we would want the same consideration for Keller, even though, or have we ruled out Keller? That's the piece. And I don't know that anything's been off the table or decided at all. So we would want the same consideration for Keller as well. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
But for tonight's purpose, moving forward, the next steps are asking for feedback from Lincoln families, staff. That's the general idea, right?
Seems to
We're
be
not
what's the most
going.
urgent.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Keller, or we think we've gotten a lot of feedback from there already?
We don't have a lot of feedback from Keller. No, I don't think we have.
But it sounds like at this point, if we're just talking about solving making sure we have locations for NEW and JDOL. Those are the priorities.
Correct.
And
That doesn't fix all of our problems.
So if we're looking at Lincoln as the best option, at least from the eyes of the NEW community, then that seems like that should be what we pursue first, because if that falls through, then we might look again at Keller. But until then, we don't really need to. I mean, Keller's sort of on the next burner after we decide about JDOL and NEW and whether Lincoln is a viable option.
So I think we have our direction then. So it will be Lincoln, family, staff, and so forth, and then also doing some preliminary things with Franklin, because that would be one of the possibilities of where the children from Lincoln would go as an option. Okay. So we'll get those posted in the next 24 hours and Vicky's report and move forward.
Thanks,
We're
Vicki.
good? Thank you, Vicki.
Thanks, Vicki.
I wanted to, the next item I have are some high-level briefings of COVID-19 updates, just in terms of the work that we've been doing. And I have a whole host of team members that are going to join in different parts of it. Just giving you, Pete's got a few more things to add for school finance. And John will give you a high-level briefing of summer school, and you should have received a document from him or Lisa. And then also, I want to give a brief update on graduation, staff return to work, and I think the biggest item on here that I think is important for just a high-level discussion, but an important discussion, is currently we have so many people who are working day in and day out in our essential staff that they've not been able to use their paid leave or vacation. So we want to talk about that as well. So at this time, I would invite Pete Ross to just share a few updates with the board that have come his way for federal and state funding.
Okay, I did send some documents and hopefully you had a chance to read those. I know from some questions that Kristina asked already that it's very obvious that she's been pouring through those documents. Both of them I think are really good. One is a Wisconsin Policy Forum and the other is the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. And I think it's in line with the thinking and the guidance that I've provided the board to date on the financial impact of the COVID crisis. And I just want to stress, first of all, that I believe that this is achievable. We're potentially going to have some cuts. I think finance-wise, they're manageable by the Board of Education. I don't believe this is going to be a roller coaster that's going to spill you out of the car. I think you just got to stay on for the ride and everything will be good. And I think it's important for the board to convey that image of security and steadfastness to the community and to the children that you serve and the families that you serve, because this is something that we will get through and we can do it. And now I'm going to throw some numbers at you, and I think you'll understand where I'm coming from and why I believe if we just keep our heads about us and our wits about us, we'll be just fine in this financial impact of the COVID crisis. So back during Act 10, the school district, well, and of course districts across the state of Wisconsin suffered about the same financial impact. It was $580 million that was taken from the aid to school districts, and I sense that that's about where we're going to head up. And this is why. If you take a look at the documents from the Wisconsin Policy Forum and the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, it appears as though income tax collections in the state of Wisconsin are going to be off about 9.7%, and sales tax about 9.9%. And so if that's the majority of money going into revenues for the state of Wisconsin, so it can provide all of the goods and services that the state needs to do, for schools at a $6 billion ticket, that's what the price tag is for Wisconsin public schools for the state of Wisconsin. So if you take a 10% or 9.5% of $6 billion, that's $600 million. So I'm equating it to the Act 10 impact that we had to manage and work our way through. So I do think that that is achievable. Now, having said that, if there is a 10% reduction in general aid coming to the state of Wisconsin for this specific school district, our Fund 10 expenditures are about $280 million. But 60% of that comes from the state of Wisconsin. So we're not talking about a 10% reduction of $280 million. Fortunately for us, and while I would be one of the advocates that would like to get education off of property taxes, there is a benefit to being on the property taxes, and that is that it's a much more steady revenue source than state revenue in the times of a COVID crisis. In conversation with the Brown County Treasurer, they believe property tax collections will go as planned. At first, we were thinking there would be a delay of 30 or 60 days. It's my understanding they're actually meeting tonight, and they're going to make a final decision on whether or not to delay county property tax receipts or not. If they don't delay, we'll have our property tax money, about $23 million that'll come to us in August. That's what we're planning for. And if we do, there won't even be the need for the school district to do any cash flow borrowing, at least not for the 2020-21 school year. Depends upon how long the COVID crisis goes. Things could get worse, things could deepen. But if the crisis continues to abate itself, we get back to work as the president has suggested, more in the fall and during the winter, a vaccine comes along as well. I think all of those things bode well. So From what I see right now for 2021, the worst case scenario would be dealing with that 10% reduction in aid. The aid that we have coming to the district is about 168 million. So that would be a reduction of about 15 million. And I know that sounds like a lot of money. I'm floored sometimes when I think of the magnitude of this district. If we want to put cloth masks on every child, every teacher, every employee of the district and give them multiple masks at the beginning of the year, if we mask up and have people on site every day, we're going to spend $500,000 just in masks. So, you know, the size of this district is still quite stunning to me. Anyway, but a $16 million reduction in aid is something that's doable. We're going to put a little bit more money in fund balance this year as a result of our plan to pay some of that balance out of fund balance next year in order to keep operations going on a smooth and even keel. And as I said when I started, I think it's important for the board to provide that even keel for the community, knowing that the district is there to have some of that burden and shoulder some of that burden, so the economic activity in this part of the state can continue to be supported by the school district, as well as, of course, all the educational programming that we do for children.
Pete, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Rhonda.
So I know you've given us some numbers and kind of spelled it out a bit, and I appreciate that. You've mentioned about the board needs to convey that everything basically is, you know, should be okay, and that we need to keep our heads, and that we need to be able to basically relay to the community that there's a method to the madness, essentially. But is there a way, other than what you just put in context, that's very that they can digest, it's in a more simple context, so it's very easy to understand, the average person can understand that? Is there any way to do that? Because I think I think that's important.
I think what you're asking potentially is for that elevator speech for the board members to have, so that you have that in your back pocket, and when community members ask you about it, you can talk about those numbers as I've described them to you, and I would be very happy to put that together for you. You bet.
Thank you.
I would even love it, Pete, if you could, I mean, is that something we could share as a one-pager to folks? I mean, the information that you're sharing right now is important, and I think not just for the board to be able to talk to people, but for people to be able to read and hold in their own space.
You bet.
Even our staff.
Yep. Now, having said that, you know, I don't want to paint a dark picture, but I don't want to paint a rosy picture either. I want to give you the realistic picture, and from my point of view, this is something that you guys can achieve. It's not going to be easy, but it can be done. And I can definitely put those numbers on a one-pager, give you that elevator speech that you can throw in your back pocket and have when you go to the grocery store or the gas station. Wear your mask, though, please.
Is it fair to say, though, as the state legislature meets and they deliberate and they're going through what they're trying to handle with regards to the pandemic situation and the potential, I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen moving forward. We really don't know what it's going to look like in the fall necessarily, because I feel like you laid out some scenarios and some details for both, but we really don't know. So is it fair to say that this is definitely still very fluid, and that if things move forward and we see what's happening at the state level?
Rhonda, you are 100% correct. It's fair to say this is very fluid, and let me give you some more information about that fluidity. My understanding is from the CARES Act that was passed and signed into law, there's about $178 million coming to the state of Wisconsin that will go through the DPI, and whether it's in Title I or Title IIA, nobody really seems to know. The DPI doesn't know, we don't know. I don't think the federal government has made their mind yet. If it goes through Title I, it'll go to schools that serve children of poverty, so Green Bay will get probably a little bit more of the $178 million. If it goes through Title IIA, it'll go to all kids in the state of Wisconsin, and our percentage will probably be a little bit less, but then that money will get to every school district. So I'm not sure exactly the vehicle that they're going to use. I don't believe that decision is made, but the point is that $178 million is not a lot of money to deal with the issues that we've been dealing with. Will it provide us with some funding so that we can support some of the COVID-related expenditures that we've had? Certainly. But that's really about it. The act that's being debated right now in Washington is the one that you have to watch. It's been dubbed the HOPES Act. It did get through Congress. In other words, the House of Representatives passed it. My understanding is in its final form, when the frills and everything that happens in Washington gets negotiated, it may be less than the $3 trillion that is currently in the House version. So let's say it's something that's closer to $2 trillion. Now we're talking about the type of money that the states need to bail out what's going on in the states. So my understanding is the HOPES Act is specifically set up for state, municipal, and local governments to deal with some of these expenditures and some of the shortfall in revenue that we may experience in 2021. So for the state of Wisconsin, and I think Kristina gave me that number, and I believe she's 100% right with it, the state is predicting to be about $2 billion short.
Yeah.
So if 2.2 trillion goes to the states so that they can do the work that they do to support local governments and schools, then the 10% reduction in aid might not even occur. And then we would be able to continue doing things as normal. So that's the rosy picture. I can't say the rosy picture will happen, but I believe I gave you what would be the worst case scenario, and I think it's doable.
Pete, can I just jump in real quick? I believe you're referring to the HEROES Act.
Sorry, HEROES Act. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Kristina has a follow-up to that.
Yep. Go ahead.
Sure. So Pete, so as this goes on though, I mean, if there is another wave and there is another shutdown, I mean, the reduction in aid could be worse, right? I mean, it could be more than 10%, and it's my understanding, right? It could be worse, especially for urban districts with the lower property values that rely on a higher percentage of state aid, correct? So when do you think, I mean, I guess it does, to Rhonda's point, it just needs to be fluid in your updates to us, and we just need to be able to pivot and shift according to what we know rather than make, sort of long-term projections, right?
Certainly, yeah. I don't think there's a capability of making long-range projections other than that the COVID crisis eventually will be conquered. There will be a vaccine. Science will tell us that whenever there's been epidemics or pandemics in the past, science does come up with a vaccine eventually. It might take 18 months. It might take longer. We certainly hope that does happen. But in the long term, I mean, if we're going to really extend things out 5 or 10 years, I think our society does support education for children, and we'll get back to more normalcy. But in the meantime, we've got a little bit of a bumpy road. Now, the bumpy road for next year, I believe in the worst case scenario, we'll be able to handle it. If the COVID crisis continues to deepen and the financial concerns continue to deepen during the course of the year, we may be more negatively impacted in fiscal 21, 22, or 22, 23 potentially. But I think you've got a plan for 2021, and you should be proud of that. You should go forward. You're not cutting staff. You're not adding staff. We're going to keep things as much as we possibly can to be as steady and as even as we can. And I think the citizens of Green Bay and Brown County would appreciate that.
Agree. Thanks, Mike. Or Pete, sorry.
And the goal is to, Pete, if you could get the one pager as you discussed, and then we'll just keep bringing you back information because it is so fluid, and if that works for everyone.
Yep.
And obviously, Pete is available for any other questions if you want to give him a holler too.
And then just one more item that I just wanted to say with respect to Kristina's comment about urban schools and the potential of having more of an impact because of the aid. I did factor that in when I did the brief calculation for you that you're aided at 60%. So certainly a school district that's only aided at 20%, that impact won't be as great. So.
And you'll be able to let us know when you get something ready for the community so that we can share that with them, or you'll be sharing that with them about some of these numbers.
Well, you'll be sharing that with your community.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Pete. John, where are you? Could you give us a brief update on summer school for the board and the community? I don't see him on the plan. Sure. There you are.
Yep. I was just turning my camera and mic back on. Yes, summer school, we have a lot of plans in place for summer school related to how are we going to use it as a good opportunity to catch kids up who might have fallen behind, to prepare them and reintegrate them for learning in the fall, as well as thinking about their social emotional learning needs, taking into account the needs of our special education students and our EL students, as well as our regular education students. And we're really looking at it in some respects as a soft start to the school year. So we're looking at how can we use this opportunity to realize that we've done really important and very careful work as a district related to how are we serving kids during this time of closure. And but we want to retool. We want to focus more on how can we get better at using the virtual learning platforms, and how can we partner more deeply with our teachers between now and the start of summer school to make sure that the instruction is as engaging as possible, is tied to learning standards as possible, and that it is a really good opportunity for our students to move forward. So I think we've talked about this period as a period of maintaining learning, and there has been some new learning, but it's mostly been maintaining learning. But we have to realize that if we're shifting into potentially into a new era, as we've been discussing most of the evening, where we're not sure what the fall will look like, if it's a blended approach of virtual and some in person, if it tends to be a start and stop because of the outbreaks of COVID virus, or if we are truly ready for fall with students in a larger capacity. But the likelihood is that we will need at least a moderate amount of support from a virtual platform, and that's really what this is about. So summer school this year, we did move it back to the beginning of July. We would have been starting quite quickly right after school was finished, but knowing that teachers and everyone has been doing so much work to teach differently, we wanted to make sure that there was enough time to pause and reset related to giving teachers the chance to catch their breath, and also to have some professional learning in place so that their instruction can be as focused and positive as possible. That's not to say that our teachers haven't been working hard doing really good work, but as somebody close to me mentioned recently, none of the teachers and none of the students said, hey, I can't wait to be a virtual student and I'm signing up for this. Nor did the teachers say, I want to work for a virtual learning academy and I'm signing up for this and I've gone through this training. We flipped a switch and we did many, many good things as well as possible. But we also know that with time and reflection and a lot of support from our team, we're going to be focusing on making sure that summer school is a relaunch to what engaging learning can look like in this environment. I'm also thinking about a conversation I had with some of the board members about how challenging it is for parents right now, how frustrating in some ways it can be for students and for parents. And I think that the students and parents need a brief period of time for that reset as well. So it's not jumping from finishing school 1 week and then a week later starting summer school. Having a little bit of a period of time there for people to catch up would be helpful. We are, however, when we think of our seniors who might have been just shy of graduating, we would be offering those opportunities as soon as possible after school is finished. So because we know that a lot of people are wanting to move on as semi-graduated seniors, and we want to make sure that if they're missing a couple of things, that we're able to catch them up and allow them to move on as quickly as possible. So those are some of the main points of what we'll be doing this summer. We are offering this week some introductory sessions for our staff, so that staff who are interested in teaching summer school get an idea of what it will look like, as well as for our parents. We're sending out our communication to our parents as to what that will look like. We're also doing a lot with pairing teachers together over summer school. So it's rather than every single individual teacher trying to kind of roll that big rock up the hill independently, we're going to work in teacher teams where we can, teams of 2, where they would work with a group of students, and they could work together to co-design and support those students in those summer school classes. So maybe I'm a little bit better with technology, and Eric is my teaching partner, and he might be a little bit better with some of the creative ideas of how we're going to engage kids from a social emotional aspect. And you would work together in that pair to support learning. And that as well would be highly supported by our student services team as well as our teaching and learning team. So there would be, and they have been supporting, but it would be designing from the ground up what that support would look like, so it's as engaging as possible. So that is the very high level overview of what will be occurring during summer school. But we also will be using a variety of measures, both qualitative and quantitative, to see what is working. And I mean, we have to admit there might be some things that don't work, and we want to learn from those mistakes so that during summer school we can capitalize on what's going well and really expand it even further when the fall starts. So this is really, in some ways, like I said, kind of like a soft opening to the fall, so that we're thinking about what this looks like. And really, when I read the research of a lot of the larger districts around the country, and when I look at what are their plans, this actually is, I am really proud of our team because it's pretty cutting edge, but it does align with what a lot of the larger districts are starting to do. If you look at a number of different districts, and also when we shared with the Big 5 school districts, they were very interested in what our plans were and wanted to had to share some of our documents as to what we're doing. And then they were doing some similar things, so we were able to share those as well. So it's not just Green Bay working together, just like we don't want an individual teacher having to think about it alone. We're pairing with other districts so that they have so that we have that support together. What questions do you have?
Kristina has a question.
John, yes, I have 2 questions actually. John, I'm sure this is very difficult for you to predict and project, but do you all have a sense of the enrollment projections for summer school? I'm sure that moving to the online platform will shift things for us. And then how does that connect to the budget that we typically have for summer school? And I'm just thinking too about, transportation. I know that's out of your purview, but then, because that sort of just wraps into it. Is that something that the board will get caught up on at a later time? The sort of the budget considerations of the needs that we've had to shift around.
Mm-hmm. So we do have some estimates of what some of the budget aspects will be. We do know that there are some professional learning opportunities that we want to make sure are there for teachers. We're trying to do things in the most cost-effective way possible, but we're also knowing that there may be, as we talked about with some of the COVID funding, we know as Mr. Ross just described, it's really hard for us to calculate exactly what will be there and what it will count for. So we're basically planning for the best, or I'm sorry, hoping for the best, but planning for the worst, not the other way around. In making sure that we're trying to do things in a cost-effective way, but we also know that if there are additional needs there, thinking about this, one thing that we've all been very cognizant of are the social emotional learning needs of the kids. When the students are reconnecting after being disengaged for a long period of time, and some of the students have maybe not been in necessarily the most positive environment perhaps, or they might just be exposed to so much because of just the depression and having been so isolated, we want to make sure that we're tending to those needs too. So it's got to be comprehensive in the way that we're looking at things. We're also right now looking at the deployment of our devices, because as you know, we have secondary one-to-one devices, but we have not had elementary one-to-one devices. We're close to being one-to-one in general as far as the number of devices we have in district, but they're not assigned to specific students for, you know, this is my iPad or this is your Chromebook, but we're working on that deployment, and then also looking at the Wi-Fi hotspots and what we're able to do as far as providing service there. We've looked at a lot of different opportunities as far as what that can look like. We're also looking at first the description was called virtual only summer school, and we didn't want to be so prescriptive as to say it's definitely only virtual. We were planning for nearly all virtual, but we also realized that as restrictions might change or opportunities for us to use some of our facilities in a very thoughtful way, where maybe you could do some sort of one-on-one intervention or training or therapy for a student that was high needs behind plexiglass or something like that. We want to make sure that we're thinking about what all those options could be. So I think that the innovative aspects that we have as far as what our team is thinking of are important. We don't have a clear estimate of how much more than regular summer school this will cost. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some added costs, just given looking at how we're pairing and teaming some teachers, and also looking at some of those professional learning needs as well as the technology needs. But those will start to emerge as we get a little closer, and also as we find out a little bit more about the COVID funding.
Thanks, John. And I'm sorry, just a follow-up. Do you have a projection on enrollment? Is there a number that you all are, for elementary, middle, and high, or is it again just doing, hoping for the best, doing the best work?
I think it will be really. I think our elementary. I wouldn't be surprised, or my forecast would be that our elementary enrollment would go up pretty significantly, because I think that the type of engagement that we could see if we're offering online could be different, and I think that enthusiasm will grow for it as well as once we are getting the word out for it. I think that the secondary pieces will depend partly on how many kids are credit deficient. I know that the administrators and the teachers and the counselors are all doing a lot of reach out. But once that message becomes a little more serious for particularly our seniors who, somebody might be credit deficient and still not able to graduate, I'm sure we would have a lot of those students signing on more readily. I'm hopeful that the enrollment will be at least as high as it normally is for summer, and preferably higher than it currently is, because we're offering more virtual courses and helping students get catch up, but then also get a leg up on learning for fall.
Thank you, John. I think one of the pieces that Lisa and the innovative team has been looking at too is the possibility of offering virtual school at child care centers for students, elementary students who might be in childcare, or even also with our community partners, possibly Boys and Girls Club and places like at the Y, so that you have a student who's perhaps there all day for different opportunities, but would really benefit from that opportunity to be in partnership. So I know Rhonda had a question. I apologize. I didn't realize that too. I saw your hand pop.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm assuming our transportation budget looks pretty good because people are going to be home. So there could be some gains there, right?
on your,
Yeah, I just figured that. Sorry, I just figured that out. I would assume that there would likely be some savings from transportation, but those savings quite often end up fairly quickly eaten by other things. What we found is that the cost of operating in this environment, it is more expensive. Like Pete talking about how many masks we use, or how many, how we're, just the type of staffing we need to do this and do this right, particularly if there's smaller number of students, if there was any face-to-face learning, those pieces of trying to scaffold kids back into their learning are going to be there. We're going to do our best to do it as economically as possible, but there are some costs to that. So we're trying to be as careful as possible, not figuring like, oh, we have a lot of extra transportation money, let's put it towards something new, but assuming that those transportation costs might go into, for example, occasionally having more teachers teaming to teach a course, or perhaps some professional learning. So I don't look at it as necessarily a cost savings overall. I think that in all, there's some chance it's going to cost us more to run summer school than as previously. And as far as the enrollment goes, our enrollment begins a week from today on the 25th. So that week, the week of the 25th is when enrollment starts, and that will give us a good projection as well. We want to give the kids what they need, and if a small number of kids need a course to graduate and we have a teacher to do it, we're likely going to be running that course no matter what, because we want to offer that opportunity for those students. But we have to look at the cost effectiveness as well.
And I guess that's what I was thinking when you were talking about, when you originally were talking about it would be somewhat costly, or there would be costs incurred. It's just something I thought of, well, but that will obviously be, I'm sure it'll be helpful. Mm-hmm. I don't anticipate that, I'm not looking at that as something that we're saving that money, we can put it towards something else. I just thought when you were speaking about that's one aspect of summer school that we won't have to, that's not an expenditure. So that would be something you could apply to the summer school, right? I mean, that's where I was coming from.
No, I appreciate that.
Kristina, do you have a question?
Yep, sorry, I have one other quick question, John, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. So a lot of elementary parents send their kids to summer school, not just because they believe in summer school, but because they need help taking care of their kids in the summer. So do you think that will have perhaps a negative impact on enrollment? I guess we'll have to see what summer camps do, but what is your team saying about that aspect of it now being home?
I think that there will be, that's obviously going to be an impact, and I think it depends too partly on how open is the rest of the Green Bay area and the economy. I know a lot is open now, but I think that there are also people that have suggested that maybe being open now might mean that we need another closure sooner rather than later going into the summer if cases spike. So if parents are home with their kids, I know that it's very challenging for parents to work from home or even be home if they don't have employment. That can even be more challenging. And I also know that summer school, even though it's meant as an opportunity for enrichment and learning, it is accessed and used by parents and students for more of a child care type opportunity. So that is something that we'll have to give consideration to. Other states too have used their school systems for childcare. So for example, other states are looking at it for opportunity for childcare for their emergency employees in various areas, and that's something that's an added challenge. We haven't had to deal with that aspect of it, but we are considering the needs of all of our students and the families as well to be comprehensive.
Thanks, John. That helps. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. As we move forward, obviously, we'll learn and together on this too. And so I appreciate that you're collecting the data, and thank you to Lisa and to Andrea as well. As we
Yes,
move forward,
thank you.
yep, the next item I have just a brief overview of graduation. I know Luke is here, and our hearts break for our kiddos that we can't do the face-to-face, at least at this time. But I do want to remind people that we are planning and looking forward, if that possibility ever exists, to have a hold in-person graduation celebration. So today we talked about maybe it would be helpful for our principals to pick a date and just get a date out there so that students could kind of plan around it, families could think about it, and otherwise then it feels less nebulous than it was, because for whatever reason, there were people who didn't recognize that we would commit to that and have been talking about that. As people recognize right now, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services and also the Department of Public Instruction had issued us guidelines around the recommendation to not hold anything but a virtual graduation, which really put limitations. I know that some districts who had gotten out ahead of us and put their plans out had to change their plans. But our goal is to do the very best we can with what we have under the circumstances. And I know that the principals have been out there working very hard to do the very best they can. And I hope, Luke, you got a sign in your yard and a visit from staff. And in addition to that, obviously, I called the mayor, and they're going to do a light show of all of our schools. You know, I think what's really important to remember, and Pete mentioned the magnitude of this district, we are graduating approximately 1,500 students. So it's very different than a school system that has one high school. So to be able to plan and think together and help move forward together, we have to always keep that in mind. And so sometimes that slows things down a bit, because you've got a lot of people as stakeholders in the conversation. We learned today that Schreiber Foods would like to light up their building in honor of our graduates as well. So we will have the bridge in a light show for our kiddos, and Lori has secured a photographer who will be able to take photos of the bridge in various colors, school colors, and put the school logo in for a student to have. But it should also be an opportunity. We've asked for a delay in how the light changes, so that if families want to quickly run down there and take a picture with their graduate by their school colors, that will be an opportunity as well, obviously. And then we have digital billboards that I believe just went up today, honoring our graduates as well. This particular class, I think, will be remembered for their strength and courage and resilience. And also the class, I think one of the principals was on TV just recently and said that they will be able to tell the story that nobody else can tell about their graduation in the class of 2020. But I think they have been just incredible in terms of their resilience, and I know it's been really hard for them, for their principals, and I think for all of us. So we're doing the best we can with what we have, but I did want to make it real clear that we are following the state and health guidance, and also the Brown County. Even though the Safer at Home lifted, we also received information on Friday from the Brown County folks that said we support the same kinds of guidelines in terms of virtual right now. But the day, we're hopeful, will come soon, and that we'll be able to have that opportunity some way, somehow, to be able to be a little more face-to-face. So I do have one thing that came up today. We have many of our seniors who have enlisted in the military and will be needing to head off, and learned just recently at a conversation with one of our moms who is very concerned because the Preble graduation is not scheduled to air until the 25th of June. And so our board meetings typically, do you know what day they run them on Spectrum? Does everybody know? I didn't even know. But Spectrum runs them on Wednesdays. So the June board meeting, one of them is scheduled to run on the 17th. And then the graduation was the 25th on Spectrum. And we wondered if the board would give consideration to flipping those days so that Prebles could run on the 17th. The children will be leaving for Milwaukee and then heading out to other places on the 22nd. So if we could do that for the kids, and and that doesn't mean that this opportunity and what we're doing tonight will still be on our website, of course, and anyone can access it via web stream. So we're also working on some other things to see if we can get the graduations on television and away in space too. But that's yet to come. So hopefully we can get that done. But a lot of really cool things are happening. The kids are doing a great job, and we're looking forward to celebrating someday face-to-face. But in the meantime, we'll do the best we can with what we have. So that's the update on graduation. Luke, any comments before I move on, or you want to do that in your report?
Yeah, I have a lot of comments on that in my report.
Okay.
Do you know what day the bridge thing is?
I think it's more than a day. It's several days. I think
Awesome.
it's a couple days.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it isn't just one day, I don't think. I could be wrong. Don't quote me, but maybe Lori Blakesley will secretly text me and tell me what I missed. So, because she knows, she has been phenomenal behind the scenes working with her principals. Any questions as we move to the next topic? Terry, I don't know where you are. If you want to give this, or Pete, just we're slowly following the guidance, bringing people back slowly for work. And I know we started last week with the custodians and our facilities staff, bringing them in. And I know that there's some plan moving forward to bring our clerical staff. And I see Terry, I don't know Terry, will you give us just a briefing so that people have a clear sense of where we're headed?
Sure. Obviously, safety of our staff remains our priority. And as we are looking to provide flexibility and work collaboratively around plans to bring staff in to accomplish work that must be accomplished on site that cannot be done remotely, we've been engaged in collaborative conversations with the representative leadership AFSCME as well as the GBEA in collaboratively planning around what the communication will be and how we will remain flexible with individuals working with their supervisor to make arrangements to come into work and practice good practices as recommended: social distancing, masking, all of those safety pieces to make sure that our environments remain safe as we work collectively.
Thank you for that. I think one of the things I would just like to compliment Terry and the team that has worked so tirelessly, making sure that every detail is looked into to make sure that our staff is really supported in this effort and journey as well. So thank you for that. And you can look for more reports in Terry's letters. I believe you're all copied on as well, and so forth. So move that. The other piece, then the last piece I have on my COVID update is talking about paid leave or paid vacation that staff is unable to take. And this will be a board decision that we'll bring back at the next meeting, and we'd like a vote on it in terms of your support. How do we address that when staff have not been able to take vacation at an important time because we need them for work? So, in COVID. I don't know which one of the two of you will speak to that as well. Pete's been on it and Terry as well. So
sure, I can address this. Holy cow, you guys got me out of retirement. Had I known I was going to be dealing with all these issues, I think I would have stayed in retirement. But anyway, here's what we got going on. In this district, like very many districts across the state of Wisconsin, people sometimes can't get their vacation in during the year because things get busy and it's very hard to get it scheduled. And so what most districts will do, they'll allow a maximum carryover that would be somewhat higher than the number of days that you're allowed in any given year. And they do that to provide flexibility for people to take vacation when they can and when they can't. And so Green Bay is no different than many other districts in the state of Wisconsin. So I've reached out to Brown County superintendents, Brown County business officials, as well as Terry and I involved in those meetings. And then we've had a lot of internal discussions recently with respect to the dilemma that we're all finding ourselves in because of the COVID crisis. People have not been able to get their vacation in. So I think most of the schools in Brown County are going to be doing a kind of a blended approach where they're going to allow some flexibility in the maximum amount to carry over. And one might suggest that that would be the simple solution, that you could just let people for 1 year carry over a little extra vacation, tell them they got to use it, and then you're done. The problem with that is that in some areas of the district, we're staffed very lean. And if we allow that extra vacation to be completely carried over, we could be jeopardizing operations of the district or safety of those individuals involved if there are certain people that are gone exercising that extra vacation. So we'd like to take, and we've discussed this administratively, we'd like to take a blended approach where about half of the vacation that a person is allotted, if they still have that remaining, if they've also reached their max, they could roll it into the next fiscal year with the understanding that they would have to use it that fiscal year. And then the other half just simply be a cash payout for vacation so that we're not jeopardizing the operations of the district by, and I'll just use an example, having the entire technology team take the month of June off or the month of July off and leave us completely dead in the water without the ability to run essential district functions. I think this is going to be something that's consistent with the rest of the school districts in the area. This is what we've all been discussing at that level with respect to a blended approach. And the reason it needs board approval, of course, is that you'd have to, for the 1 year, suspend or provide flexibility for board policy 222.1. I hope I'm right on that, rule 2, which governs the carryover and the utilization of carryover vacation. So let's just use some quick numbers here. Let's say, for example, that a person hasn't taken any vacation the entire year. They have 20 days. And I got to tell you, I'm a new employee of the district. I've not gotten anywhere close to my rollover. So all of my vacation is going to roll over into the next fiscal year. No problem. I guarantee you there's not been the ability for me to take a day of vacation since I started here. And I think that that's probably pretty consistent with many of the fellow employees that I have that work with not only administrators, but also staff persons. So for many people, they haven't maxed their rollover and it'll simply roll over and it won't be an issue. For others that have 20 days left and they've maxed already their rollover, you would be allowing them to roll 10 days and then potentially be paying them for as many as 10 days as well. And we like to do that in this fiscal year. And there's a process in place that we can have that achieved in July, if you support this and vote for it, and then have that roll back into this fiscal year for aid purposes. And auditors are certainly okay with that and have been informed that that's a potential so that they know that they would be looking for that. Any questions that you have?
Will you be, Pete and Terry, will you be putting forward soon your proposal so that the board will have time if they do have questions prior to June 1st to ask them?
Yeah, my understanding, Michelle, would be one last time at leadership to put the final touches on it, and it would be ready. The next leadership meeting is Wednesday, so we would have it ready for board to go out so that they could look at it and review it and ask questions.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
So, yep.
Thank you for that.
Trying to be as transparent as we possibly can be. So,
That was good. Thank you for all your work on that, Pete, Terry, and the team. I'm going to wrap right now and move on so that others can give their reports. But I did want to share that, Luke, I did get a text from Lori. The city has proposed a Monday through Friday to do the bridge lighting. And so she's waiting for confirmation on that, but it would be the week of June 1st. And that would be just a lovely way to, hopefully we get some better weather than today.
Sweet, yeah.
That would be good. So you're the first to hear that. As we move forward, I do want to again compliment, beginning with Jake Alverson and the principals, all of the signs. When you think about 1,500 signs going out, and it's an anecdotal story, but it's an important story, where Lori Firk, principal from East High School, took a sign to a home where the student was at work, and the parent was so grateful and did not expect, the child had not necessarily signed up to go to graduation, hadn't purchased the cap and gown, just kind of said, I'm done. And the mother was so grateful to receive the sign. And he called and got a cap and gown. So it just really, it just warms your heart. Those are the kinds of things that happened with the signs and recognizing our kids. And, you know, I've got one email sitting in front of me right now that was sent to a principal and the staff from another school that said, wow, today I'm crying. And the parent, I think the parents are so grateful to have something that it can't be traditional, but it certainly honors their children and the hard work, because obviously children don't get where they are without the partnership and the support of their families. And so anyway, so that's my story. One of the successes of many that have gone on to, in spite of it all, you see such extraordinary things coming from students and staff. So anyway, I'm done now. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Lots of good information there. And I just reiterate, I think it's good for us to get updates like that. And I know things are changing fluidly. So thanks to you and your team for putting in all that time and keeping us updated on all those moving targets.
You're welcome.
So looking back at the agenda, we don't have legal updates. So we'll go to Luke and Yuli with the Intercity Student Council report.
All right, so it's the second one of these since school ended, kind of. In-person school ended. So we received our caps and gowns, which is awesome, and that was such a cool day. That happened yesterday, actually, and getting all the texts from all my friends and oh, did you get your cap and gown and everything? And a lot of people took pictures in them. Mm-hmm. And overall, it was really cool. And we got our empty diploma cases, so it doesn't have our diploma in it. We all were tricked for a little bit. Yuli?
Yeah, okay, so as you guys all know, we have our virtual graduation dates. East will be on June 13th, Preble on June 25th, Southwest is on June 18th, and West is on June 11th.
And Adopt the Senior program started at Southwest, where families will adopt another family's senior and basically send them gifts. And personally, my adopted family, I don't know who they are, but they've sent me a couple of things, and it's just been fantastic surprises that I've received. And if anyone's interested, there's a full Facebook page for that. So yeah.
Okay, following for that, for East, 3 students made it to nationals for HOSA. Their names are Gretchen Farrell, Rachel Maloney, Grace Schumacher.
Like Dr. Langenfeld mentioned, all the yard signs appeared on our seniors' lawns, which was a great surprise for everybody involved. And some kids got to talk to staff members from their school. So yeah, that was That was another great surprise that we got.
Another good thing at East happened was at East, a group of students made it to state for Whipping Up Wellness competition. Their names are Ketty Gollin, Kaya, Rhoda Heaver, Jennifer Vasquez, and Grace Schumacher.
Senior balls, a lot of them have passed already or the day they were supposed to be. So a lot of students dressed up and either video chatted their friend or just dressed up and took pictures outside their houses or whatever for senior ball to get in the spirit.
Also, I'm sorry, my camera wasn't working, so I have problems with my camera. That's why I'm not on camera. But another good thing was that at East Student Council, seniors have received their signs and shirts delivered from our advisors, which is also really cool too.
The graduation speakers at, I know Southwest, JDAL, and Preble have all been decided, and there's virtual auditions for those. So yeah, that was it was cool to see graduation actually start to feel real, kind of.
Yep. There's also a Guardian Angel reveal party, a social distancing on Thursday afternoon at a park. So that should be very fun for all the seniors.
Preble had 9 kids qualify for DECA Nationals, as well as a couple of kids from Southwest. And although DECA Nationals got canceled, that's still a huge achievement for a lot of our students.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Also, as JDAL has a virtual Teacher Appreciation Week for each of their student members, recognizing through social media. Since we can't see them on person, they're doing something very special for their staff members on an online thing. Yep.
West Student Council passed resolutions thanking its staff for the work that it has completed during the pandemic, and also thanking teachers for a Teacher Appreciation Day. Southwest NHS has also done a similar thing to thank staff for all the extra work they've done during these trying times.
West IB program usually has an informed celebration for graduation, and the IB club has been planning for it. So that should be cool.
The student council at JDAL had their elections. No other student council has, and they are either postponing it or figuring out ways to do it for the upcoming year because they still want every student to have an opportunity to run.
Yep, and lastly, JDAL has their senior night event on May 28th, and it's going to be happening through a live Google Meet. Yep.
Yeah, and that's about it for us.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks Luke and Yuli for all of those great updates. It's wonderful to hear what our students are doing. So thanks for sharing that. All right, next we have our legislative liaison report. I'll hand it over to Brenda.
All right, thanks, Eric. I'm going to cover basically 3 different things. The first one is a follow-up with Pete's presentation with the finances. I did find out today that the money, the $175 million, is going to be coming to the DPI. They've been given permission to follow through with their plan. And according to, I have an email that was sent to the, sent to the Joint Finance Committee that said that the 90% of the money will be distributed based on Title I Part A allocations, and then 10%, and then that money must be used for preparedness and response efforts to the COVID-19, and then sanitation and distance learning online instruction. And then the other 10% of those funds would be used for professional development and training for teachers in virtual learning, and also expanding and building capacity of staff for student mental health services, and then also building capacity for high quality online instructional resources. It was interesting, in one of they talked about how the virtual learning investment, they're thinking, well, will be good moving into the future when schools have to be closed for other reasons, such as snow days, or in our case, the Preble fire of a number of years ago, things like that. Let's see. So that's all on that one. And then also, board members received a letter that Dr. Langenfeld sent to our legislators describing the work that's gone on in our district in the last couple of months. And that was an ask from the Administrators Association, because there was sorry, I'm looking for my notes here. Oh, here it is. Because that was in response to a conservative talk show radio host that made the comment that the schools are cheating the students and taxpayers, accusing schools of taking the money and not doing anything for students. So I think that letter really is a huge testament to the work that everyone in our district has done. I know there's many people that are working harder now than they've ever worked, and I know there's a lot of efforts to make sure that all of our students stay engaged, whether that's teacher to student, or I know we have paraprofessionals and monitors and social workers calling students, trying to find them, to re-engage them if they're not, and provide them with the support that they need to be able to engage in school. So and I don't know, I had asked Lori if that letter was, I checked Facebook, but I didn't see it there. But I think that that's something that's really good for the community to have, to see all the incredible work that's been going on.
Yep.
And then, go ahead, Michelle.
Just as a follow-up, we've been asked to trim it back and try to put it across the state, to tell our story across the state of Wisconsin and put it in more of an op-ed kind of piece. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a good story to tell.
Mm-hmm. And there are lots of, and I don't know if, can everybody access that SAA site? Because there are lots of letters from a lot of other school districts on that site. So it's interesting to read what other districts have been doing also. And then lastly, as you know, the Supreme Court decided last week that the Department of Health Services had exceeded the scope of their statutory authority in the stay-at-home orders, and so the stay-at-home orders are no longer, although except for the fact that they determined that the schools would remain closed, and so we will remain, based on that right now at least. Obviously things change, but based on that, we remain closed until June 30th. And the schools are going to be working with the DHS and DPI and the health departments. And I think primarily the local also, in terms of looking at our specific data and what they're telling us about the infection rate and things like that. That'll determine moving forward what happens after June 30th. They also, the schools can be used, and this was the previous order, not related to the Supreme Court decision, but schools can still be used for essential functions like food distribution, which is what we're doing. And then related to opening or closing schools, I just wanted to make people aware of the fact that there are some kind of cursory guidelines that have been put out from the CDC. There's been some talk in the national news about frustration that those guidelines are not very specific. And then, so that's part of why I think our local government is encouraging us to go by our local health departments and medical community to help us make those decisions. But there's a school decision tree that talks about, you know, as you're looking at making decisions, obviously if you have a confirmed case in your building, that sort of changes everything, at least in the short run. in terms of contact tracing and also cleaning the school and those kinds of things. And then also it has, then the other decision trees have to do with what the spread is in your local community and whether there's no community spread or minimal to moderate to substantial spread of the infection. So, so anyway, that was basically all I wanted to cover tonight.
Great, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Rhonda.
Thanks, Brenda. Is there any way moving forward, the information that you shared around the state legislature, you have some breakdowns that were very interesting and I think valuable information to have, as well as you talked about the letter that was put out there. Then there was a link you mentioned that people could look at. Is there any way maybe moving forward that in the agenda you can include all of that information so that board members could have that as well as the public? And it would be something, I'm taking a lot of notes constantly, and I think this is information that we should have this ahead of time. It would be great. And then I think the public would love to have that as well.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and actually much of my information was so recent I didn't have it on Friday. But I'll send out the information that I have in terms of the website addresses. Yeah, I'll send something out to board members.
But even the letter.
Pardon?
Just to not lose what I was saying. The letter, you mentioned the letter. There was a letter that you feel is valuable. It's board members, but it's also that the public has access to this information as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah, I'll moving forward, I'll try to do that. Like I said, literally the Supreme Court decision was Friday, and the letter I just received this afternoon. So, and that letter was dated Friday also. So, but hopefully in the future this stuff won't be so last minute. But I'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think one of the things, because we monitor the same websites often that give us the feedback, the Department of Public Instruction has a very robust COVID-19 website opportunity. WASB, I would assume the whole board gets the WASB updates too. Those are really up to date often as well. And I don't know if everyone can look at those or not. I really don't know. I know the DPIs you certainly can, but I don't know about if you have to be a member of WASB to see their stuff or not. So
no, I think we are members.
Yeah, but
I think all of the board members can see the WASB stuff. I'm not sure about the SAA,
yeah, I'm not sure either.
Can access that or not? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I just know there are letters from other districts because they've had a tell your story campaign.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we could put we could put the links to some of the things we monitor in terms of legislative movement, and what gives us information that other people could check too periodically, so they would know where to go. And we could put that on our website just as sources of information that the public can follow along all the time.
Yeah, I know we used to have back when we were actively campaigning against vouchers, we used to have a whole legislative section in our website.
Yeah. Okay. Do that.
All right.
That's the end of my report. Thanks, Eric.
Yep. Thanks, Brenda. Next, we have district events. I know we talked a lot about bridge lighting and graduation ceremonies. Michelle, did you have any other district events or anyone else?
The FFA banquet at Lombardi was virtual and went on last week, and Carla Zimmerman, if you know her, is an extraordinary woman and loves FFA, and the kids do too. So that's just one example I would offer of the many, many things our teachers are doing to go above and beyond to celebrate students as well. So that was just one thing I was invited to, but I know there's many, many things that go on. So celebrations and things. What I was told by the principals, some principals, is what they're trying to do is recreate whatever the end of the year looks like the best way they can in a virtual format is what they've been doing too. So to try to keep it their same celebrations looking a little bit different, but being able to do that. So.
Excellent. Anyone else on district events? Next one is board member school visits. All right, we had some debate about whether or not to keep that on there. Obviously, all of our buildings are closed with the exception of cleaning and then the meal services. So I think we'll keep it on there just as a placeholder, but can't imagine there's much going on for district school visits.
Eric?
Yes.
I didn't obviously visit any schools, but I was able to sit in on May 5th a couple of staff meetings, one at Washington and one at Nicolay, that were very interesting and frankly very comforting to listen to staff members talk about their work and their priorities and just kind of what their challenges are right now. That was very nice of them to allow me to sit in on those meetings and also express my sincere gratitude for what their work is like now. And then on May 15th, I also got to sit in on I guess it was a question and answer meeting with Dr. Shragi Holly about cultural responsiveness. So there'll be more of those, and I think there'll be a whole series. I think, is that correct, Michelle?
Yeah, they're engaging Dr. Holly in ongoing work.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
That was
Vicki can
forward. Yeah, that was very interesting to listen to the discussion between the teachers and Dr. Holly. And I, like I said, these aren't obviously actual school visits, but it's as close as we're going to get right now. So
yeah,
I just wanted to hear that.
Thanks for sharing that, Laura. Can you, how did you get connected to the school staff meetings?
I just asked.
You just, are those your schools for this year, or?
Yeah, I get their newsletters, and you know, it was a teacher appreciation and staff appreciation week. So I saw that they were having some of these meetings, and I thought I would just ask, and not, you know, just in case it was, just ask carefully, because I don't really want to impose on those meetings. But of course, Cindy Olson and Shana were very, very gracious and open and said, sure. So I just sat quietly and listened to them talk about their work. That's it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a good idea. I didn't think of that. All right, if there's nothing else on school board visit updates, we'll move to the teaching and learning agenda, and that'll be facilitated by Brenda. Brenda, you're still muted.
Too many screens to pull up and put down. So the first thing we have is I move that the Head Start Summer 2020 program supplement as presented be approved.
Second.
And this, as you know, was we talked about this last time. It's an application for more grant money for summer school, and they just needed the school board to give basically our approval for their application.
Any discussion on this topic?
Sorry a second. I'm sorting out screens too, and I thought it was my turn, and it wasn't. So
That's all right. All right, Sandy.
McCoy?
Laura, are you there?
Laura?
You're mute, Laura.
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye. Pass 7-0. Oh, go ahead, Brenda.
Next is the dress code policy, and I move that the dress code policy 443.1 as modified be approved. And essentially this modification is changing the date of reconsideration of the policy from June 2020 to June 2021, as written in the policy that's attached to our agenda.
There a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All right, Sandy.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Eric,
Andrew.
I just have to. It's I really wish we had a better option here, because I didn't want to leave this issue linger. There's a lot wrapped up in this, but I just couldn't come around to any way that a responsible, rational discussion about something that became so emotional could be held in the middle of a pandemic. There was no way to do it. And so it's not that I relish this extension. There's just no other way to do it. And I don't think you can drop it in the middle. I don't think you can postpone it for less and drop it in the middle of an ongoing year that might look different. So I think this is just one of those where circumstances forced us to do this. I certainly would not have supported an extension just for convenience or just because the work wasn't done or something like that, but we just have to, I think.
Can I also make a point? I know that Laura had talked about listening in with Dr. Hawley, and I had a phone call with him not that long ago, and I think knowing that our district is working with him, or I guess partnering to learn a bit from him, I think it's important to touch on this topic again, maybe just as a discussion point as we move forward, using some of what he is trying to get out there, the message he's trying to get out there as far as cultural responsibility in regards to dress code. So I'm excited to hear that the district is, keeping him in close contact with us, and that we're maybe considering some of the things that he's saying. I just wanted to add that.
And then to add to Andrew's point, I also we had planned to have a principals meeting around this topic, and actually Andrew and I had been working back in March to plan how that meeting would go. So I know that that's something that we had intended to do as a board, to meet with the principals, to have a conversation about the dress code, to get a better sense of their experience since the dress code policy was put in place, and suggestions, and just have conversation about it. So I think, to your point, Rhonda, I agree that having Shiragi Holly's perspective will be helpful, and I think that the principals, I'm assuming, are also part of the conversations with him, so hopefully they'll bring that to our meeting.
Do we know if they're part of the conversations with him? Are the
principals attending?
I would
know that Jeannie was there. Vicky's on. Principals are attending the Dr. Hawley pieces, the professional developments.
We're focused right now on the middle schools with hopes of expanding in the future.
Okay.
But the principals are attending. I know I saw Jeannie.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been more direct about that. That's correct.
Yeah, I was over at Washington.
Okay, so the middle school principals are attending those, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, thank you for including us on that invite for that event last Friday.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we'll kick it over to Sandy.
Becker,
Aye.
Sitnikau,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
McCoy.
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
Okay, and lastly, I move that the resolution regarding the suspension of board policies related to 2019 Wisconsin Act 185 as presented be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Sandy?
Warren,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Sitnikau,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel.
Aye. Pass 7-0.
And that concludes my report.
All right, thanks, Brenda. That moves us on to organizational support part of the agenda, and that'll be facilitated tonight by Kristina Shelton.
All right, Eric, thanks. So the first one up we have is for the 2021 school fees. I move that the 2021 school fees as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one. What are we? What are we doing about commencement ceremony fees related to this year?
If I could, one of the things that we have looked at, and we actually talked about this, is that the fees that we're using right now are fees that we're using to support some of the different things that we're engaging and purchasing for our students, whether it's signs or those kinds of things. If I'm not mistaken, Pete, is that what your recollection is? It was early morning, but I do recall Angie speaking to it and the cost of some of the materials and things that we are purchasing right now to mitigate. It's different focus, but we are spending that money. So go ahead.
Right. Yeah, Michelle, you're absolutely right. Rather than purchasing the event at the Resch Center and the things that would happen during a normal graduation ceremony, and
Right.
all of our hearts certainly go out to the seniors, but we've been doing mailings, we've been doing the
Yep.
signs, we've been doing other things with that money.
The billboards, actually the taping and all the virtual taping and that piece as well is where the funding streams are going. So
I guess I never was okay with having a graduation fee. Sometimes I've voted for the fee schedule because I felt okay enough with the rest of what's in it, but I don't know, it just seems a weird fee to be collecting right now, and it looks like I guess it looks like much of it's been collected already. Was this collected earlier in the year before we even knew what was going to happen, or were we collecting them after we knew it was likely to not hold an in-person? I realize there is no board policy that says specifically, by the way, collect this anyways if there's a pandemic, or don't collect it. It's obviously silent on that. No one anticipated it.
If I recall the same conversation, Angie indicated at that time it was actually collected in the fall, if that's what I remember in our conversations.
Okay, if
That
this is
seems like-
if this is mostly collected in the fall, I guess I'll consider it a separate issue. I still don't. I still am opposed to the idea of charging a fee for a commencement ceremony, and it's, if I remember correctly, it's not a waivable fee either, and people have to rely on the informal network to get it waived. Is that true?
I don't know.
Is it? It should be in the. It is a non-waivable fee though, right? It's not automatically waived.
Andrew, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Maybe this is one of those situations where you actually request for the future agenda item to be, we revisit this graduation fee reality place. I would, if you don't, I will. So.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I am wrong. It is waivable. I was mistaken. At one time it wasn't. It is waivable now, so I'm glad that that fee is in the automatic waiver. So,
Yeah, Andrew, it is. I just looked at the memo, and it is included in those that can be waived. And I do apologize with my newness of the district. I've never been here for a collection of a fee, but I do believe those fees are collected in the fall.
okay. So I'll be able to vote yes on this because the commencement ceremony fee is waivable, but I would like to eventually see us do away with that, and it just seems the wrong message, but.
Are you requesting a board agenda item for that?
Well, I mean, we have one every year, so I mean, it's automatically going to be up in May next year, so I don't know if we need to take it off earlier, but okay, sure, yes, let's not, in the interest of not having it till the last minute next year, yes, I'd like it at some time, I don't know, January, February, a little bit ahead of the final approval schedule of the draft. I'd like a separate discussion on a board agenda about the commencement ceremony fee.
Except if they're collecting it in the fall, Andrew, then we're looking
good
at
point.
refunding money if we decide not to have that in place.
Yeah, good point. Well, I think it's probably too late here at the 11th hour. I think it would be in place for the 2021 school year as a waivable fee, but going forward, I guess, is when I'd like to look at getting rid of it.
Andrew, I'll make a note to put this on the agenda early 2021 so that we can have this discussion leading up to when we have to approve it for next year.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. I forget. Did we have yeah, we had a second, right?
Yeah, I just want to note too, Eric, just for everyone, that this recommendation, there's no increase in fees for 2021 overall.
Yeah. And we have the right to change things if, parking pass fees, if there's no parking, Okay. Sandy?
Shelton?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
No.
McCoy?
Laura, you're muted.
I'm sorry, guys. Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Pass 6-1.
All right. I move that the table of organization be modified to change the Associate Superintendent of PK 16 programs, 12 months, salary group 1A, to the position of Deputy Superintendent, 12 months, with no change in salary group, and that the associated job description as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'm sorry, Kristina, you should be the one. You call on Rhonda, is that correct?
And it's
or
a
do I-
regular board meeting.
Oh, sorry. Yep, sorry. All right, thanks. Rhonda.
Okay, thanks. Would you be able to, could someone just, I guess, give an overview of what the deputy superintendent, I know many of us know this, we've discussed it, but for people listening in, what the deputy superintendent is versus the superintendent job description, you know, everything that encompasses what that is, that position is compared to the superintendent. Thank
As
you.
compared to the superintendent,
Well,
the deputy.
the question I've not received it is, okay, you have a superintendent, so what is the difference between the superintendent versus the deputy?
Sure. The deputy superintendent will merge that. We are not doing two with the restructure. The proposal that both Vicki Beyer and Steve have come forward with, and I don't know, maybe Vicki wants to speak to it as well, but it's my understanding, and it makes sense, the deputy superintendent will provide that oversight of our executive directors directly, executive director of elementary, secondary, as well as the executive director of student services, and then also have oversight of the district leadership and professional development and coordinator of community partnerships, as well as district alternative ed. The purpose of this position is to be able to unite both the teaching and learning side of the organization as well as the student service side. So bring that under one person as opposed to currently we have it under two. So that was one piece, to bring greater coherence and to be able to leverage. The superintendent actually is responsible for the entire organization. So that person, the deputy, reports to the superintendent, does the chief operations officer, the communications department, facilities, and the whole entire organization as well. But this will give greater continuity in terms of being able to leverage both sides of the organization around teaching and learning, that whole student-centered focus as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a high-level look and so forth.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All right, Sandy.
McCoy?
Aye.
Vanden, Heuvel?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
I move that the transfer of Vicki Beyer, Associate Superintendent of PK-16 Programs, 12 months at the District Office Building at a salary of $145,894, Group 1A, to Deputy Superintendent, 12 months at the District Office Building at a salary of $158,581, Group 1A, 2021 step 2019-20 rate effective July 1, 2020 as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sandy?
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Vanden, Heuvel?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
I move that the table of organization be modified to change the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Secondary, 12 months, salary Group 4, to the position of District Leadership and Professional Development Administrator, 12 months, with no change in salary group, and that the associated job description as presented be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Sandy?
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Sitnikau.
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
I move that the transfer of Michael Freeze, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Secondary, 12 months at the district office building at a salary of $122,340, 100th percentile, to District Leadership and Professional Development Administrator, 12 months at the district office building with no change in salary, effective July 1, 2020, as presented, be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Rhonda?
So I would just like to know if we could give just some information about, I know that Mike had been doing a job in the middle schools to support students, staff, and I'm wondering, with this transaction, are you backfilling that position? Are you looking for to continue that support, to improve on that support? What's the plan for that?
John, can you speak to that, please?
Sure. Thank you. If there are particular projects that are still being done at various levels, there would be an opportunity for the executive director of schools that supported that school. It might not just be limited to the middle level, but that work would be directed by the executive director. So if there were projects that he were to continue with, such as similar projects related to expanding professional learning around leadership of learning support teams or professional learning communities, that would still be something that could be undertaken by Mr. Freeze. But we're also finding that just for overall coherence of the district, the professional learning department was dissolved approximately 6 years ago, and we're finding that the need for professional learning and coordinated professional learning is partially growing out of the work that he was doing there in that position. So it's really an opportunity for him to continue some of that work, but really to capitalize on better coherence for the district as a whole.
Okay, so I appreciate that information. So that tells me about what he'll be doing. So going into the building level, because it was my understanding that that position was created to give extra support in the building. So is there going to be anything added, or I guess, what's going to happen in the building, I guess?
Sure. So it was a shift from the teaching and learning department where so there wasn't a creation of a new position there. We had made that shift partly because of an interest of making sure that we had job embedded professional learning, and so that job embedded professional learning can still take place. But we had left his title that's the same, so that there was a description of the job that still said that he was secondary director of teaching and learning, that made it sound like he was part of the curriculum instruction and assessment department, but really he had moved into a role that was transitioning, and so we wanted to make sure that that was in place at that time. However, we were finding that the specific needs of the teachers in those buildings really came down to being better served through the professional learning department. And so he's still going to be, there are aspects of that work that can still be done in his current role, but it would be more directed by, there needed to be a tighter coupling of what the executive director was doing in support of the schools with what Mike, or with what Mr. Freeze was doing within his position. So it's still, there was still be support of schools, but it will be, it's a shift in focus. So there is some change there.
So is it safe to say then the executive directors will be focusing more on that themselves?
Could you repeat that question? Sorry.
Okay, sure. Is it safe to say that the executive directors will be focusing more on that for the building? My question
Yes.
is really all around support for the building.
Mhm.
Like, that's my concern. That's
Sure.
where I'm going.
Sure. So there's still going to be very clear support of the buildings, and part of this redesign is to provide more targeted support for the individual buildings as well. There's work being done within just the structures overall of serving the schools, as well as this basically the work that was done by the team overall in supporting schools individually. This was something that emerged as time went on throughout the year. This is the way that we saw his role emerging in best support of the school. So it wasn't just the support of that particular school. I'm sorry, my dog is growling at the door trying to let himself out, and I profusely apologize for doing so.
No worries. That's fine.
Sorry, he was ringing in his bell and barking, and nobody was there to hear it. I apologize. So I was trying to pay attention and give a great grounded answer while my dog was basically biting my ankle.
Well done. I had no idea.
Thank you. I know, I was like, but, all right. But so it is, the role is changing. The role, I feel his work was good in supporting those teams within the school, but the way that the curriculum, instruction, and assessment department has shifted so that there's a greater focus from that department. Remember as well that you, as a board, you gave more support to the teams there in elevating some positions from teacher level position to administrative position. And so that was more of a focus on school need too. So in doing so, there's greater coherence of secondary teaching, learning, and instructional supports for the school. We saw the need emerge from those schools for principal leadership as well as professional learning coherence. And so that's where keeping the resources the same for the schools overall, except for those additions and changes within teaching and learning, we're able to best meet the needs of the school. So if you're thinking of individual teacher need, I think that this still will serve the teachers very well. I don't look at a significant shift away from support of teachers, but I think that it will be good support for the schools overall and more coherent too. One thing I would say is Vicki and I worked over the past 4 years to really, there was a lot of talk around two different teams and how are the two different teams working together or not working together. And really over the years, we worked for greater coherence and a real blending of services there. So basically I think that was, we all have distractions, right?
Yes, we do.
But at least nobody bit your ankle. And the dog didn't really bite mine. He's a good dog. Didn't mean to defame my dog on YouTube. But overall, we really looked at the structure overall, and I think this will lead to greater coherence. It'll lead to better service of teachers, better service to schools.
Brenda, do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to offer too, and
sorry.
also as what? Am I good?
Yeah. I forgot about Andrew.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew, if you want. I was just going to add something that we also are adding a fourth executive director as part of this restructure. So that person will be able to provide a little bit more, or when we're dividing our schools by 4 people instead of 3 people, the schools will get more support through that mechanism. Is that right, John?
Yes.
I don't know.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say, as someone who really liked the idea of putting mic freeze in buildings and having them, with the chance to be around the kids day to day. Sometimes not that was his primary role, but when you're in a building, you're closer to kids, obviously. Having worked with him a long time ago in a place where he was kind of doing a train the trainer for staff and student leaders of Operation Snowball way back when we were starting. I think he's exactly the right person to put in charge of professional development. I think he is just really, I mean, there's a lot of places that you could put Mike that he'd be outstanding, but like, you know, going back to having and as someone who doesn't take lightly the sticking a new admin position or reactivating a dormant admin position, I think this is a place that needs top level leadership, and I think Mike can provide that.
Thanks for that feedback, Andrew. Anyone else? All right, Sandy.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Smith?
Dawn, you're muted.
You're muted, Dawn.
Sorry. Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye. Pass 7-0.
All right, I move that the Coordinator of Community Partnerships and Grants job description as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion on this? Biggest change here with this job description is that it changes the required degree so that someone doesn't need a degree in education to be able to come in and work with our community.
Yep.
So that's, I think, a really great change. All right, Sandy.
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye. Pass 7-0.
I move that the transfer of Elizabeth Kunstman, administrative intern at Edison Middle School at 191 days at a salary of $70,060 to middle school associate principal at Edison Middle School, 11 months at a salary of $86,995, group 9, effective August 1, 2020, as presented, be approved.
Second.
Any discussion?
That's
Sandy?
a direct replacement for retirement.
Thank you. Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
I move that the transfer of Beth Jones, executive assistant to the executive directors of elementary and secondary education at the district office building, 12 months at an annual wage of $56,611, to the executive assistant to the superintendent of schools and learning and board of education, 12 months at a salary of $68,12, group 12, effective July 1, 2020, as presented, be approved.
Second.
Any discussion here?
I would like to just offer that Beth, moving her forward, Sandy will partner with her. She's got big shoes to fill, but Beth will be actually doing the June board meeting. So that will be her first foray in. And the good news is Sandy isn't far away, so we're fortunate. So anyway, so big shoes to fill, but she'll do a great job, I'm sure.
I'll just add that I sat in on the interview committee with the team, and Beth is going to do a great job. So really excited to have her.
Yep.
All right, Sandy.
McCoy?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
All right, that wraps up your portion, Kristina. Thank you. Looking for a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
Sitnikau?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Pass 7-0. Future agenda items. Made the note of Andrews for the fees. We'll get to that next winter. Anybody have anything else? Go ahead, Rhonda.
I wanted to bring this up for this portion of the meeting, but I'm wondering, just because of the timing of what's left as far as our next meeting, I've been hearing having a lot of, several teachers have asked about, they want to be able to get out and connect with their students in a drive-by type of experience, that personal connection. And I would like to talk about that, but now that I'm looking at we only have so many weeks left of school. So I think it would be better sooner than later. Maybe that's just something that the district can discuss in general, especially when we talk about recognizing all of the things that we touched on when we talked about the senior signs and the connection with that. And I think, I know teachers for morale purposes would love to be able to have that opportunity if possible. So, but I don't know, that future agenda item might not actually be possible because it's too much time will have passed. And I think they would have liked to have done that yesterday, frankly.
I don't know if we can't say anything, right, Melissa? We did look into it.
So, Ron, if you want to reach out to me, and we have talked about it internally, and we would love to do it too, and there's reasons that we haven't been able to. So if you want to give me a call, I can discuss that further with you as to why we haven't done it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably like a phone call about it too, please.
Sure, give me a call.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Takes us on to our June regular board meetings. We have a June 1st work session, June 15th regular board meeting. I know some people reached out and asked about meeting in person. We'll do both of these meetings virtually. We'll start to have the conversation around what potentially it could look like if we can get back in person. But right now it looks the earliest that we'll be able to do that is our first meeting in July, if possible. But we're definitely going to follow all the safety guidelines and make sure that, the people that need to be in the room can be in the room safely. So just wanted to update you on that, and we'll try to get back in person as soon as we can safely. All right. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy? No, you just going all in favor. That's all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. All right, pass 7-0. Thanks, everybody.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.